So we are going to start with a little more explanation about what the quiz is, how I grade it. As I said before, you have multiple opportunities to play for me. It's not like if you send it to me and it's not perfect that you don't do well and you're done. I will send you advice and tips back so you can make it better. And we can go back and forth as many times as you need to get it. Now, the final result, what does it have to look like? What does it have to sound like? It needs to be steady. What does steady mean in music? I'm going to play you a couple notes that are steady. Or here's the melody. I'm going to play you a couple notes that are not steady. This is kind of obvious, but when you're actually putting a song together where some notes are supposed to be longer than others, it might not make as much sense. My advice to you, and I'm talking to the person that really doesn't have a musical background. If you already have played some, this is not helpful for you. You don't need it. But for those that this is new, the best way you can get the rhythm and the notes good is to listen and try to emulate what you're hearing. So it doesn't have to be fast. Some people confuse speed, fast or slow, with steady because in some ways they seem like they're a little bit the same. Like, I'm going to play you a little bit of Song of Joy fast. That was really fast, but it was steady. So if it weren't steady, what that would mean would be, and it could be random, because if it's not steady, it could be wrong in many ways. It would mean some notes were too long, some were too short. So we will talk more about that individually as you need help. But as far as speed, you can go slow. Slow is fine. If you go really, really slow, you might find that that makes it a little harder. You're going to want to find the pace at which you can think it's as comfortable as you can get it. You don't feel rushed, but it's not so slow. Like, for example, if I go, for me, that becomes a little hard to even concentrate because it is so boring. So I'll help anybody individually if that's an issue with you. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to talk only a little bit about each line, do it line by line, and then we're going to move into the newer material. The assumption is now that you can play all the chords and you can play the right hand by itself. You might be having a little trouble getting the hands together. In fact, I expect probably half of you are having trouble with that. That is normal. The solution to that is not just more practice, but more focused practice where you're concentrating. If you have a day where you're just super tired, if you're feeling sick, it's not a great idea to practice. You want to practice when you're fairly relaxed, not pressured. If you've got an hour from now, if you have an exam, that's maybe not the best time to practice. So let's go through the first line, and I'm going to play it as though I was a person where I'm still focusing on those chords. How do I do that? I set both hands up. I'm careful. I'm not too fast. And if I have to, I pause before the chord change. This is practicing. This is a practicing technique. After I do this, I'll play it all the way through. You change from practicing to performance. In performance, you don't slow down to think. You have to work at it till you can go straight through. So this is like a practicing. Let's say, oh, you know what? I still have the little tape on my finger. I mentioned I broke a fingernail way down, and so I've got it taped up. Sorry. If you need to, you pause just a little bit to get it set up. Checking both hands. Now, if you're still in that phase where you're working on it like that, you're best off not going all the way through, but repeating that section, because what's going to happen is as you keep repeating the hard spots in a section that's small enough for you to really get, it's going to get better. So maybe after doing that, what I might do if I were a student, maybe I would just do 2 measures a couple times, then the last 2 a couple times. Then I would do the whole line until it feels better, but I wouldn't stop them. Once I'm feeling like, yeah, I think I'm getting it, I would do it maybe 3 times. And that should really set it in. The next day, you're going to have to do some of that again, but it's going to be easier. Usually by the 3rd or the 4th day, if you practice like that, you're going to suddenly see that your hands just know what to do. And that is so cool. Now, let's look at the second line. There's more challenges here. There's 2 big challenges. Let's look at the beginning challenge, and that's going to be going to that F chord. You got to get the F chord set up. So I would do that a couple times, then I would go into the 3rd measure. Being careful. And I do that a couple times. Then I would probably really focus on the end, the last 2 measures or the last measure. If you go just to the last measure, it's probably going to sound more funny to you. That might be harder to do. It's probably going to be a little harder starting in the middle too. I'm going to start in the middle, and I'm just going to do it a couple times. As you go on, when you practice this way, you get better at it. I'm starting right in the middle of that last line. Both hands are set up. I'm careful here. Slow and plodding and thoughtful. And if you start that way, it might be a little easier. To get the ending. Play this C first, then both. All right, let's go the whole way through like it's my quiz. That's our goal. If you do that slower, that's okay. Now, I wasn't really going to do this, but I'm thinking I probably should just do the bare minimum. The reason I do a little bit with the saints in the very beginning is to get people used to that left hand repeating. Hold that note. You play the G before. As a minimum, if you're feeling behind or you're busy, as a minimum, do that. We're going to see this again if you read a little music, page 45 and 47. And I'm just going to hold it like this. I'm not going to like scooch over to the seat and do that because that would just be kind of awkward. But 45 in your book and 47 has the same thing with the melody in the left hand. Don't worry about that now if that seems hard or scary. All right, what we're going to go over now is how you're going to approach the book. I went over last class pretty much the beginning with the pictures. Excuse me. Make sure you go through that. Page 12 is where the playing starts. Now, here's what the book gives to you. At the top, if you've got your book there, you might want to open it to page 12. If you don't, I'm sorry you don't see it now. When you see this video, the overhead, that'll make it more clear. And if you just don't want to watch the video, if you're really busy and you're thinking it'll take too long, I provided that sheet in there where you can see every single thing one at a time, just focused on one thing. Now, what you see at the top of the page is a diagram of a piano with a hand on it. And they put numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the fingers. That's how you set up. Now, I'm in the middle of the piano, and that's what these notes are. But if this position feels cramped, where I don't know if you can see it, I just can't tell because the contrast is so strong and the backlight's there. When the wrist is not straight, but your hand kind of cocks to the right, a lot of people find that uncomfortable to stay in that position and play. If that's the case, do some of your practicing up at the next octave. If I go from this C, 2 black notes, C, 2 black notes, this is the next C. We call that the next octave, or we might say the higher octave. But of course, if we say higher, there's another higher and there's another higher. There's more C's. But this position up here allows your wrist to be straighter. Now, if you've got a smaller digital piano, this might not hold the same because you might be moving it a little bit. So we're not going to worry about that. Just if this is uncomfortable, go to the next one. In the page towards the middle, there is a pink box and some pink text. It's not exactly pink. It's kind of a pinkish red. Anything in the book with that color, there's a darker color they use for text and for outlining the box, and a paler color inside. If you see that, that's important. That can also help you if you forget something. Let's say you're working on a song later on, and they're talking about something. You know what? My head's cut off. I'm gonna raise this a little. Oops, got a little shock there from the carpet. I'm gonna raise that a little. All right, that's a little better. Okay. You can still see the keys. Yes. All righty. Pink means it's important. Let's say you're further back in the book and they say something and you don't remember what it is. Just page through and glance at the pink boxes. It'll be an easier way to go back and find something. All right, that being said, what does that tell us in the middle? Treble clef sign. The treble clef, it's also called the G clef. Many of you have probably seen that in chorus, in a like whether it's like high school, junior high, whatever, even elementary, in a music class. Clef means sign, C-L-E-F. It's a sign that helps you figure out what note is where. This particular chart in the middle has a small keyboard with letter names on the notes. Above is a line of notation. Notation is when we have the music notes on the staff. Well, what's the staff? The 5 lines. And do they say that there? Yes. I'm a little above halfway down. The treble staff has 5 lines and 4 spaces. You're going to need to read that, but some of you probably already know this. They then line up the notes with that picture of a staff. It's a visual that's really helpful. It's very explicit. It's an explicit graphic that if you look at it, I think you're going to find this makes sense. Underneath, you're actually going to play examples of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play one and explain a few things. This is the right hand warm up, the first one. What do I see when I look here? I see a treble clef. Right now, what that tells us is we're doing a right hand exercise. Down the road, if you like piano and keep going, down the road, either hand can play in the treble clef. Treble, the word treble means high, the word bass means low. Like, you know that song, it's all about the bass, no treble. You probably have heard that. It's kind of a cool song. So treble is high. On the piano, these are some of my treble notes. These are some of my bass notes. they're very deep and they're kind of rich just because of how human hearing works. We hear those notes kind of more deeply. So we see the treble staff, the treble clef on the staff, which is the treble staff. And the lines and spaces tell us what the notes are. Now, we're not quite at the point where we're going to be discussing that. We're actually looking at notes one at a time. They're just putting some notes there and telling you what they are. So if we look at this, the first one that I'm going to play at the top, there's fingering 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That fingering is going to correspond with your hand. Then we have the notes. The notes are an oval. They're black ovals here because they are one beat notes. We can say one beat or one count. It's the same thing. And they have a stem. If you think of a flower stem, it's that long thing. And the stem comes up from the note, or it also could go down from the note, but we don't see that yet. So looking at that, we've got a lot of information in front of us. So I would suggest you think about that, then place your hand. When you place your hand, just like we did with Mary, it might be easiest to start by just thinking of those numbers first. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're in order, and I'm going to play fingers in order. But what you need to do very quickly is you need to look lower at the notes and the letter names. And it's a lot initially if it's new to you. But if you just do it and repeat it, little by little, you will remember. I will never give you a test where you're forced to remember all this. That's not how this class works. What you're going to need to do is you're going to need to learn songs, and you have plenty of time and opportunity to work on them. Down the road, if you play, you'll absorb a lot of this, and if you get to the point where you continue, you can spend a little bit more time if you want to get faster at it. So once again, right hand warm up. In the middle, there's a big skip. You might notice if you're looking at these, and if you're not, when you watch this or when you look at the book, the notes kind of make a little line going up, and then there's a gap or a skip, and then they go up again. Now the next one starts on the higher part and goes down, then skips up. I'm skipping up. At the end of each line, we have 2 vertical lines. I talked a little bit about bar lines before. You've got 2 here, a thin one and a thick one. That's called a double bar, and on the next page, they're going to explain that. That just means it's the end of something. The last one goes up, repeats, and goes down. This is one of the easier things you're going to do. You can start it easily by thinking of the numbers, but please review it and think of the letters. That'll start getting it in your brain. Next page. Pink boxes, quarter note, half note. If you're not looking at this, you're really going to need to do this later. My suggestion to you, hopefully you've got your book. Have the book when we work, because if you can look at this now, it'll just make it easier. You'll get a lot of your understanding right as we go along. Quarter note is a black oval. Half note is clear in the middle. Half note gets 2 beats. It's like a code. There's clues. A note has 2 codes or 2 clues. It's got a rhythm code and a pitch code. What does pitch mean? Pitch is the letter name. We can call it a note, we can call it a tone, or a pitch. Alrighty, so in the middle of the page is explanation about the rhythm. There's an example that doesn't have any pitches. It's just rhythm. How would you do that? You could clap it. So I'm going to clap that line. It explains measures there. These are quarter notes. That's a half note. So when I held that longer, those were the half notes. Now, bottom of the page, this is a different version of the Ode to Joy, Song of Joy. this version, they really simplify or make even more steady that rhythm at the end. When I played it from the sheet, I play it how we hear it, how people kind of know that it goes. This is simplified. Alrighty. Page 14 and 15 are theory pages. I call them writing pages, thinking pages. They are theory pages. This is not something that you necessarily would play. It's not a song. It's not going to sound great. Although, if we look at page 15, you can play through that. You could do that. You don't have to. But if you're new to this, you should go through these pages. Now, top of 14 has you practice making the treble clefs. This is a good thing to do if you're going to go on in music. If you're going to take theory, this is really going to be helpful because you're going to have to do them. If you're just here for piano for fun and you're busy, I'd say try one. Don't worry about it. It's not like you're going to need to, you will never need to write these for the class. Through writing, you gain recognition, but you'll gain recognition because we're going to see it constantly. Now, if we look at page 15 briefly, at the top, what I see is notes that are skipping. They're going from line to line. That's a skip. Now, there can be a bigger skip. That's the smallest skip. If I look at the next line, the notes are going from space to space. They're skips too. They're not steps. If I just flip back to the bottom of 12, those notes mostly went by step. They went line, space, line, space. You're going to need to read through that to get some understanding. Now, and I realize I want to keep going with this. Page 16, left hand, I really broke down the explanation on the right hand. You can read that yourself. It's kind of the same thing, but just for the left hand. Here we have bass clef. These are the lower notes. And for now, this is our left hand. I'm going to go to the warm-up. I put my hand in place, and I'm going to mention one of the first, let's call it confusions people have. Your left hand thumb is 1. After working on the right hand, where your thumb is 1 on the C, people often get mixed up and think that the C is going to be 1. In the right hand it is, in the left hand, no. It's on G. Just be aware of that. As we go through the quizzes, it always happens. Every single term for 25 years, some people will get this mixed up. I hope you don't. And if you do, I will simply point it out so you can fix it. All right, here we go. First, warm up. If you're looking at your book, it starts on the G and it steps down, skips up, and steps down. I'm going kind of fast. You don't have to start that fast. I'm going to do the next one slowly. Big skip down. Last one goes down and then up. I'm going to skip that because I just want to make sure I get to the page that's my goal. Page 17, whole note. And once again, everything I'm doing for you, you'll have this video. Let me mention, I hope it works. I hope I set up everything right. If for any reason it didn't work, you still have everything. I always would tell people in the beginning of the class, like there always is that chance something could happen technically, but you have lots of redundancy. You will have everything you need. Page 17, we introduce the whole note. It's an oval, clear in the middle, no stem. It's 4 beats. You hold it longer. I'm going to play orally at the bottom. This one is a lot different from what we've done. First of all, it's a melody in your left hand. That's different. But there's some skips and some steps. Don't be surprised if this is harder at first to play. Line 1 and 2 are identical, so I'm just going to do 1, and then I'm going to talk about it. Here is line 1. Whole note. I held that 4 beats. Here's how I suggest you approach this if you're new to piano. You might want to try going through the whole line. Second line's the same. It's probably best that you don't do that, and here's why. When you're learning something new, you don't want to take too much at once. You want to take a small amount and figure it out and repeat it. You'll probably learn this best if you do a smaller section. Let's do 2 measures. There's a lot to unpack there. If this is new, you might want to take 1 measure. If you do that 3 times, that's going to be easier. Then add a little more. What happens as you repeat, your brain starts remembering how it sounds and how it feels. So you want to break it down like that. You can then start in measure 3. Break it in sections, put it together. Once you've got it together and you do it another day or 2, try the second line, go all the way through. Page 18 and 19, theory pages. Once again, you're going to want to read through these. If you're not really thinking you're going to go on in piano, or if you're really pressed for time, don't worry about drawing all the bass clefs. Do 1. Just look at it, try to do 1. But go through these exercises unless you already know these notes. This brings us, let me just check our time. Oh, great. This brings us just about to where I want to be. I'm going to talk about page 20 and do a little bit on the top of 21. The grand staff. That means both treble and bass clefs. There's plenty of explanation there. There's a brace that joins them together. This is how piano music looks. If you see that brace and the 2 lines, you know that's piano music or harp. Why would it be harp? Harp is in the same family as piano. In fact, inside a piano is a huge metal harp. They call it a harp. It's just, I don't know why, they just do. But in the orchestra, it's in the same family as piano. One other thing it could be, well, actually a couple variations that we seldom see. It could be a harpsichord, keyboard instrument. It could be a clavichord, which you probably never heard of. It could be an organ. If it were an organ, there would be this plus an extra bass clef for the foot pedals. So here's what we got to get. There's something very important here. Time signature. 4/4. Now, I'm going to explain it right now, and you're going to start with this. But let me reassure you, there's so many things to think of. When you watch the videos and listen, you're going to get this, and down the road, you'll come to understand this better. 4/4 means we have 4 beats or counts in a measure. The bottom 4, we really don't need to worry about now because it's not going to change. But what that means is a quarter note gets 1 count. The whole term, that's never going to change. In fact, if you take the next level of piano, it's not going to change. If you keep doing music, you might see the bottom be a 2 or an 8, but we don't have to worry about that. So that means we only have one thing to worry about, the top. Most of this term, it's always going to be a 4. Well, yeah, kind of most, but as we get towards the middle, I say 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks from now, we're going to get a few with the 3. But don't worry about that yet. For now, it's 4. So something else is new here. At the bottom, we have now rests introduced. Music has notes and it has rests. Rests are silence, but they have to be accounted for because silent for how long? So just like notes where it tells you 2 beats or 4 beats or 1 beat, the rest do the same thing. They're introducing whole rest here. It's like a rectangle that hangs from the 4th line. There's small pink text down there that you can read. I'm just going to point out, if we glance over to the bottom of 21, they introduce quarter rest. So I want you to read up to 20 and then look at 21. Just be looking for the rest. I'm going to play the bottom of 20. Even though we now have the grand staff with two hands, one hand is always resting. So it means it's ready, but it's not really any harder to play. Here we go. I keep going. There's a repeat sign there. It's a double bar with these dots, 2 dots in each clef. That'll be easier when you're looking at it. So let me just check our time. It's 2:20. I'm going to point out just a little bit that I want you to try, and we'll look at it next week. So I do want you to try Rock Along. On the next page, I'll play you just one line. It's going to be repeated notes and skips. The left hand is going to do the same thing, but it's going to be different fingers. Same melody, because the pinky's going to play the first one. So what I want you to work on between now and Thursday is going over everything in there in the book that we talked about. If you didn't do the first like 18 or 19 pages, look at the pictures. You'll see all the stretching, relaxing, the different exercises. I told you before, you probably don't need to do any exercises, but if your hands get cramped, those can help you, just like making a fist, stretching, and shaking, just shaking at your side, relaxed. I want you to try Rock Along. You're going to have, this video in particular is not going to help you, but you're going to have a link to a video. In fact, that's the #1 video on the song sheet with links. At this point, from here to the end of the term, every single thing we do, there's 2 videos with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions where I couldn't find a second one. And of course, there's always going to be my videos too, but this is an easy source for you to find. So I'm going to wrap up.